Good morning, Summit Old Guard. How are you all? Today, we have a wonderful speaker. And if James can come up here. Jim, all right. Jim's going to talk to us today about how to transition into a happy and healthy retirement. And this should be a very interesting talk. Looking forward to it. But let me tell you a little bit about Jim. Jim was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1943. He attended Brooklyn Technical High School and earned his PhD in theoretical physics, mathematics, and mathematics from the Polytechnic Institute of Brooklyn in 1969. Now, I bet you there's a lot of Brooklyners in here. Raise your hands. There you go. Were you born and raised in Brooklyn?
Yeah.
Ah, and were you all born and raised in Brooklyn? The people that raised your hand? There you go. We have some camaraderie here. That same year, he joined AT&T Bell Labs in Allentown, Pennsylvania, where his early work led to key advances in semiconductor physics, reliability physics, and the discovery of the universal mobility curve for MOSFETs. And MOSFETs are metal oxide semiconductor field effect transistors, which are little teeny weeny transistors. And when you discovered this, what were some of your things that brought you to that point of discovering the universal mobility curve?
Oh my God. When I was out in Allentown, my principal responsibility was to put together the fabrication process to make an integrated circuit. Thad here had the easy job. He just had to draw it out on paper. I had to make it in silicon. And it's, I say, designing it is really tough. There's a lot of logic and a lot of timing that goes into it. They were always breaking computer codes that worked on the timing. So I have a lot of respect for the designers. We worked very closely together for many years. But when I was out in Allentown, since I had responsibility for the fabrication process and transferring it into Western Electric, which manufactured it in millions, I always worried about, suppose we bought the wrong chemical, or we bought the wrong gas, or we bought the wrong so-and-so, all these materials are coming in, and oh my God, all of a sudden the characteristics of the transistor are going to change. And then they're going to all look at me and go, you screwed up. It happened. I mean, so I spent about 2 years convincing my director that we really had to study how transistors work. And he told me, well, the guys in Murray Hill are the real experts in that. So I went, okay. So I kept on him, and then he allowed me to buy an automatic test set so I can measure discrete transistors. And I started making test patterns, discrete transistors, and I started making them in all different ways. Like you take a silicon wafer and everybody grows the gate oxide on it. And it's nice and smooth and it's perfect. And you're going to get a transistor that's going to operate just the way you want it. So I said, well, what happens if I grow like a micron, a really thick oxide layer, and then I strip it off? And every expert would tell you, oh, that roughens the surface. It screws up the electron flow. It was written by Andy Grove in his textbook from Intel. Can't do that. He plotted graphs in it talking about all sorts of different ways the electrons flowed along the surface of an MOS transistor. So I was sitting around measuring all these different transistors that I was making under a million different conditions. And things were really archaic. Now, let me tell you, we would plot the computers didn't plot the data. You didn't get the nice fancy screens up there. I would have to plot the data as it got printed out on my remote terminal Our computer was an IBM mainframe in Murray Hill. I'd get the data, it'd be a long sheet of data, and I'd plot it out on vellum. And the reason I did that is because all the curves look kind of different. So one day I'm sitting in my room, it's about 5 o'clock, and I'm playing with this paper, sheets of paper, and I'm moving them in different directions. And I'm saying, these curves all look kind of the same. They look like they're pieces of each other. And I started putting them together, and I got this curve. And it was a single curve for all the transistors fabricated in all different ways. And I looked at it, and I said, oh my God, Grove, what is Grove going to think? What do I do with this? I mean, I really got scared, because when you find something like this and you're going to go up and you're thinking, oh, 6 months from now, I'm going to go up in front of a conference and I'm going to present this. You know, everybody in that audience is going to look at you and say, this guy needs his head examined. So Thad read in there that my training was in theoretical quantum physics. So I started thinking about the problem in a quantum mechanical way. I said, wait a minute, you can't measure two transistors and compare them unless, in an experiment, they are in the same conditions. So how do you make them in different conditions? Well, to make a long story short, you can change the back bias on it. You can change different voltages on them, and then you can see what the how the electrons are flowing and whether they have a lot of resistance on the surface or not. And I sat down and I derived a very simple equation on the blackboard that night, and it all made sense. It said, do not plot the way the whole community is plotting. Plot it as the threshold voltage plus the gate voltage, no matter what. And I did that, and they all had one curve. And so I went on and I published that paper in 1979. It had over 200, and the last count, 20 primary references in the research community. Now, in a small research community of people looking at the dynamics of how an MOS transistor, when you have 200 people out there referencing your paper and trying to replicate it, it gets a little dicey. So that's what got me started in transistors.
And if you want, you could probably open up a semiconductor physics book and you can learn about the universal mobility curve. And along with this, Jim has published papers in fields of insulator and semiconductor physics, semiconductor device structures and fabrication technology, CCDs, DRAMs, and manufacturing quality control. By the 80s, Jim headed research on VLSI CMOS technology, and in 4 years, introduced 4 generations of scaled-down integrated circuits and the world's first 32-bit microprocessor. Now,
We did that together.
yeah, and I'm sure there's others in the room here. Raise your hand if you know of the 32-bit microprocessor.
The Mac 32.
Ah, we have a few people here. All right. And then he transferred to Murray Hill in '84. He led breakthroughs in advanced lithography, including the first deep ultraviolet excimer laser projector, now standard in chip manufacturing. And I think it even goes further than that. It is the only way of building nanometer chips, is my understanding.
Yes.
And there's only one company in the world, and I think you know who that is, right?
Yes, ASM lithography has made the next generation machine.
Right. And they're the only ones in the world that offer this piece of machine to build integrated circuits. And they're in Holland, I think, or someplace around there. His leadership extended to international lithography, assessments, management studies at MIT and the University of Tokyo, and directing AT&T VSI research department, where he negotiated and managed the AT&T NEC alliance. And one person that was really interested in the NEC Alliance was Arnold Penzias.
Oh, yeah. Arnold loved it. Arnold loved it because it worked, and people said, you'll never be able to get the Japanese to work with an American company. But we did. I had a great team. I had about 40 MTS people with PhDs working with me. And in order to overcome what I call a lot of the social and cultural barriers, 2 steps. Number one, I took night classes and learned to speak Japanese and read calligraphy. And then the second thing was I learned to go out with them every night and drink and sing. And we did a lot of karaoke over the last 10 years with the Japanese. So I had a lot of fun doing that. But when I finished that up, it was at the time that Lucent was formed, and we had a lot of chaos going on in the company.
I remember the NEC, AT&T efforts, because I worked on that too. And in Japan, if you got drunk, a Japanese worker got drunk, they can talk back to their management and they have no problem as long as they're drunk.
Yep.
Jim's honors include being a fellow of the IEEE, the AT&T Clinton Davidson Trophy, the Polytechnic Distinguished Alumni Award, and the Bell Labs President Quality Award. He dedicated 25 years of volunteer service to the IEEE and helped globalize its reach, and serving as executive chair of the International VLSI Symposia. He calls his greatest achievement his 56-year marriage to Deanna Beck, with whom he raised 2 children. Their son, James, is a graduate of MIT. Their daughter, Amanda, is a graduate of Rutgers Mason Gross School of Fine Arts. Jim retired from Bell Labs in 1999 to begin his many adventures. And today, we are going to hear one of those adventures.
Thank you.
Jim, please take the podium.
Thanks, Scott. You know, a lot of things that happen in life, you kind of fall into. They're accidents. And I want you to understand that. That's a very important thing. When I made up this talk and put all the view graphs together, I sent them to Joel, and we had a conversation back and forth. And he wrote to me and he said, "Hey, Jim," he said, "you don't have an introductory slide." And I went, "Oh." He said, "I made one up for you." I said, "Great, thank you very much." And I really appreciated it. But I read the title. It said, how to transition into a happy and healthy retirement. I can't tell everybody how to do that. Everybody's got to figure out something on their own. And that is a very important difference between what I'm going to talk about today, and we'll just go on to the next slide to show you. All right. I have met and I've known a lot of people, and some of them have when they retired have had a difficult time. So I put this together to sort of explain what happens to what I would call maybe a typical person. Everybody has their own story, but let me go through it. And what I call is, the orange part is called your work life, and the green part's called your leisure life. Now, you sleep 8 hours, you work 8 hours, and then you have about 8 hours a day free. And if you time average it over months, it'll come out about 8 hours each one. A lot of people go into retirement. They know they're going to be retiring, and they get their fancy gold watch or their clock that doesn't work or whatever. And then Monday morning comes, Friday afternoon, luncheon, dinner, whatever. Monday morning comes, and they're in this white zone. They go, "Oh, I'm going to play golf. I'm going to spend the rest of my life in retirement playing golf." It's raining, no golf. Or something else happens. They don't have a game plan. There's nothing there. But as time passes by, they begin to get involved in activities here, which in fact are uh, very pleasing to them. And then slowly they fill it in. And as time passes, they've gone through this transient part. And hopefully, most of you are out here in the green part, where your entire life you are independent, you make your own decisions, and no one's telling you, like, you've got to be in Milwaukee at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning for a meeting with the so-and-so people. Okay, so what happened with me? Like I said, there are accidents in life. I was working, same kind of deal, 50-50. And then in 1999, I got an email at work. And the email was an invitation to go on a sailing/vacation in the Virgin Islands. Now, I had been to the Virgin Islands before, and I said, gee, this is a great idea. So why don't I went home and I talked to my wife and I said, let's go. And she said, oh, this sounds great. So we had been to the US Virgin Islands a couple of times. And so off we went. That's 1994, to give you a rough idea. So this time span is about from 1990 to about 2010. Okay. Down here at the bottom, I'm giving this talk as I would give a technical talk. You give a summary first of what it's going to be, and then you go through the details. And because of the details, you may run over time, and I didn't want to do that. The one thing I've learned in life is you've got to continue your education. No matter what you're doing, even when you're in the green zone, you've got to keep educating yourself. And when I got into this green zone here, there were a whole bunch of things I wanted to learn about. And so that was very important. The second thing I learned, and you may find this as a kind of a strange statement, but it's prudence. To make people happy, I went to Google AI and I looked up prudence. And I'll just read it for you. It says, prudent behavior is characterized by caution, good judgment, and a mindful approach to decisions, involving careful planning, foresight, and an awareness of potential consequences to avoid unnecessary risks. It emphasizes thinking before acting, being resourceful, and managing affairs, and acting with wisdom and discretion. Well, that's the definition of a sailor. And I'll tell you, if you don't do that, you can be in deep trouble. But it's also the definition of almost every profession that you practice. But it really bears home. If you are 60 miles, some of you are, I understand, are sailors. If you are 60 miles to 70 miles off the coast, and you get into a deep problem, a significant problem, there is no help available. You have to solve the problem yourself. You have to be independent and you have to come up with the solution. And I mean that seriously. I've seen a lot of things happen in my life. I've seen and heard fishermen die, falling overboard, and all sorts of things. Okay. So now I got this email from my friend John Beck, who had something called the Adventure Club. And what he said was, let's go on this vacation and you really enjoy it. I'll give some sailing lessons and I'll teach you about basic sailboat. And that was in March 1994. So I said, great, let's go. Now, I understand some of you have been to the Virgin Islands before, but let me point out something about them which makes them ideal for sailing. This over here is Puerto Rico. If you've ever been to Puerto Rico, great. If you've never been to Puerto Rico, it is one of the most beautiful islands in the world. The people are rather poor, but it is possession in the United States, and it's a great place to visit. Over here are the U.S. Virgin Islands and the British Virgin Islands. And notice that it is like a channel that runs through this area. Now, that is very, very convenient because at this latitude, the winds come in from the northeast, not the northwest like here, but the winds come in from the northeast. So there's a constant wind blowing at about 10 to 15 knots. And for would-be sailors or learning sailors, this is a great place to go. You can charter a boat. And in 1994, there were about two or three companies that had boats available. So off we went. This is a picture. It's very British. The British Virgin Islands are actually really beautiful. The architecture and the building setup are just lovely, and you can have tea time if you want, and you can day sail, and then in the evenings you can go to the restaurants, and it's a very striking to see this stucco and red on the hills. This is a typical island called Jost van Dyke. Some of my sailors have been to the Virgin Islands, may know it. Um, now let me go back. This is a very interesting place because what you notice is that this picture is taken, this is from the south. The winds will come up and go over the mountain, and you have this nice cove here where you can anchor, and you'll notice there's quite a few sailboats gathered together. The reason for that is that over here in this little blue dot was a little tiny shack called Foxy's. And Foxy's became world famous for selling Caribbean lobsters and fish sandwiches. And so what we would do in the 90s when we were practicing sailing is we'll come in the afternoon, we'd anchor, go have some lunch or an early dinner, and then maybe sleep overnight on the boat here or go off to another island. Um, but the islands are very softly shaped and they're very dry. So the weather is essentially always beautiful. Too many controls. Okay, for anybody who's been on a sailboat, I took this picture to show you what that channel is like. Um, we're on a 55-foot Beneteau right now. If you notice here, there are white caps, and white caps form at 15 knots of wind, which is actually really ideal for sailing. The surface isn't choppy for a boat like this, and you can heel the boat over. Now, heeling the boat over about 15 degrees is optimal, so you can then trim your sails, and they become very aerodynamic. And you can get a boat like this that weighs about 35 tons. You can get it going at about 8.5 knots, and that's about 11 miles an hour. Now, you may not think that's very fast, but if you're sitting down about 6 inches above the water line and it's going past you at 11 miles an hour, it's like a waterfall. You are flying. And I didn't want to go into the details of what um, the technical details of sailing and things like this. But what I wanted to show you was that, yeah, it's a fun ride, and it's a place that really got into me um, mentally. Um, Sailing is not an easy sport. It's a real workout sport. If you're going up that channel like I showed you, and you're tacking all the way up, you're every 15, 20 minutes, you have to change the position of the sails, which means you have to let them out, and then you have to hold them back in against the wind and trim them. And here's a picture that somebody took of me. I was kind of pooped, and that's what it looked like in 1994. And my wife she always smiles like, oh, this is great. This is wonderful. So we finished up sailing the week, and I was really into sailing. I really enjoyed it. I didn't get seasick at all. My wife didn't get seasick. And I realized you don't get seasick if your mind is very active and you're working on the boat a lot. You got more things to concentrate on than um, It's a control function in your brain. Never had a problem. So after we finished sailing, we went to the airport with John and the other people. And I put this little star as a reminder for me. John says, hey, look, he said, I'm going to do a vacation sale in May, and I'm wondering if any of you would be interested in it. People looked at him. My wife looked at me like, keep your mouth shut. And I said, I couldn't help it. I said, John, where are you intending to go? And John said, oh, that's easy. We're going to Polynesia. And I went, you're going where? He said, we're going to Tahiti, and then we'll sail the islands around Tahiti. Now, in 1994, there's no internet. The only thing that I knew about it was the fact that Marlon Brando made Mutiny on the Bounty, and people talked about it as in National Geographic as an exotic place to go. But John had found a small company that rented 2 or 3 boats out to people who wanted to sail the islands. And I said to my wife, oh, you've got to come with me. I said, we got to go. And she's saying, no, I can't get time off. I'm having a lot of problems at work and stuff like that. And I really don't want to go. And I'm listening to this and I'm saying to myself, I'm not getting the real answer. So finally, I sat her down and I said, look, I said, what were the problems? Oh, on a boat, I wasn't in the rhythm. I was hitting things back and forth. I got black and blue marks on my legs, and it didn't look nice. Women are always worried about what they look like. She said, it didn't look nice and stuff like that. And it was all men. And, I, no, I'm not going to go. So I said, okay. And she said, but if you want to go, you go. And I went, okay. And it was the first time we were going to split up. But she said to me, wait a minute, I want you to take your son with you. And I said, you want me to take my son? Jimmy's in college. He'll be finishing up in May, his semester. Tell me the truth. Why don't you want me to go to Polynesia? And this was her answer. Because Polynesia has a reputation of beautiful, free women who live a very uninhibited lifestyle. And I will tell you that in Polynesia, the lifestyle is like that. The people were really wonderful that we met. But I remembered my wife telling me about this, and I dug this picture out of good old Google. But the people there really dress this way, and flowers are everywhere. Coconut trees are everywhere, and they're very graceful people. So what is French Polynesia? You have to learn something about it, which I did, which is really fascinating. The main island down here is Tahiti, but most people don't go to there. This island here is Morambora, Moreo, and that's where Marlon Brando shot his film Mutiny on the Bounty. But what we do is you take a small plane from Tahiti, and then you fly, the island is called Tahiti. Then you fly over to these islands. This is Raiatea, Taha, Hawaii, and that's Bora Bora. And then that's the pinnacle of people like, Bora Bora? You went to Bora Bora? Yes, and that is Mopiti, another island. Now, the other thing you may notice on this, I hope everybody can see it, is that you can see the island, and then there's a ring around the islands. And that is something which is unique to the South Pacific. when an island is formed, it's a volcano erupts from the seafloor, forms a gigantic cone. Once it breaks through the water, then it's subject to erosion. But while it's being eroded, coral life grows around the perimeter of the island. So think of a big cone, and then along the side of the cone, a coral reef is growing up. And it forms sort of a barrier around it. And then inside, you have water that's very shallow and filled with coral. And then you have some deep spots that may be 12, 15 feet deep. So you can come into this just a small channel, and then you work your way very carefully through small openings, and you can be in these bays. And it's really unbelievably. This is a picture of the erosion that you see going on. Okay, now let me tell you about the erosion. This is very typical on the Hawaiian Islands and also in the French Polynesian Islands. And if you wonder where the French Polynesian Islands are, they're about 2,000 miles south of Hawaii. And one of the things that people think about it is it's always beautiful and it's always blue sky. Not so. They get a tremendous amount of rain, and that causes the erosion of that volcano pumice. You'd get up in the morning and have you'd get a crystal clear blue sky, and by noon, the sky has, from the heat of the sun, you're in the tropics, the heat of the sun has overcast the entire place, and by 2 or 3 o'clock, you have rain coming down in worse than the greatest shower I've ever seen in my life. You can't see more than 6 to 8 feet. This water comes pouring down, and twice we were caught in sails like that, where you actually have to slow down and wait for the rain to pass before you can move on. And so this gives the islands their unique, uh, beautiful, or what I call features, but it also gives the islands their fauna and flora. When I was in Tahiti in 1994, we were like we had 2 boats that we took out, and this is what the typical streets and construction is like on the island. The local indigenous people live on basically 3 products. Number one, they cut down coconuts, split them open, take out the copra, and dry them in the sun, and then that is taken by commercial people from like the United States or whatever, and then that copra is squeezed down to get coconut oil. And coconut oil is used in anything from cosmetics to cooking to a variety of different uses. So copra is one of the big products that these people live on. The second one, which is very unique, and it's kind of humorous with the old guard, is orchids. They grow orchids. Now, I don't know whether many people know about it, but vanilla is the bean pod from an orchid. And so you have these small orchard farms of orchids, and then when the bean pods are formed, the people pick them, dry them in the sun, gather them, and then sell the pod and the bean to distributors who take it to the United States and Europe and stuff. It's very expensive to get natural vanilla. Vanilla is a very important financial resource to these people, and it is absolutely delicious. One of the men who was making vanilla was soaking one of his bean pods in a bottle of rum, and, and he shared it with us, and we had a grand time with it. This is a picture of a friend of mine by the name of Doug. Like I said, we met many different people who used to go on these sails. And it was in the evening, we were relaxing after dinner, and he just stood there with his arms open saying, I found paradise. And he really meant it. And it kind of, I looked at him and I said, it, something's up with this. So I took his photograph and I remembered it. And then a year later, John told me Doug died. Doug had cancer. And Doug had grabbed the moment to go to Tahiti before he died. And I always remember that if you got the moment to grab it. Don't let it go by. Don't say you can do it later because you never know. Doug was in his early 50s. He worked at Bell Labs. He was a software engineer. Now, one of the things that I showed you the rain because I wanted you to understand that there is a lot of water vapor there. And I'm a scientist. Bear with it. In the evening, when the sun is setting, you still have a lot of the remnant clouds you can see from the thunder showers. Oh, the interesting thing is they're not thunder showers. There's no static electricity in these clouds. And the reason for that is there are no winds sweeping over islands and picking up dust, which carries electrons up into the clouds and builds up the static charge between the earth and the clouds. This is just water evaporating, going up, cooling, and then pouring down. So this one evening, I was sitting there after talking to people and watching the sunset. And as the sun went down lower and lower, I realized a couple of things. Number one is the air is crystal clear. You can see this mountain is 15 miles away. You could see it as clear as a bell, but the atmosphere has a lot of water in it, and it reflects out all the parts of the visible spectrum from green onward. And what you're left only with is some yellow, orange, and into the infrared. And so you get these sunsets, which are blazing. Here's the sun up here. It's blazing gold, and then reflecting off the water, it's actually red light. You're sitting there and you're looking at this thing, and you're saying to yourself, is it really true? I mean, and I have not photoshopped this or changed anything about it. Back in 1994, I took this picture. All right, let's go on. This is my son. He was with me, and we had just finished swimming in one of the lagoons, and I had my camera with me. And I said, hey, Jimmy, grab one of those large leaves and just put it in front of your bathing suit. He said, why? I said, let's just do it. Took this picture, and I brought it home, and Diana said, well, what do your slides look like? What was it like? And I said, oh, I've got some good news and bad news. I behaved myself. I said, but we never thought about Jimmy. He really went native. And she looked at me like, you're playing games with me. And I said, yeah, I am. I said, we had a great time. And my son's now going on 50 some odd years old. He still gets a laugh out of this picture that he did when he was 19 years old. A year goes by. I get another phone call in February from John saying, hey, you want to go on your vacation sailing lessons? And I go, okay. So I said, I'm not so sure whether we'll be able to make it. I said, I got to go home and talk to Diana. So I went back home, talked to my wife, and she gives me all the reasons. I get black and blue marks on the boat from bouncing back and forth, and there's no women, and all you guys are just like talking technical stuff, and you're all being macho. And she said, I just got drained of listening to you guys for a week. So I said, okay, I can understand it. I said, let me call John and see if he plans to bring any women with him. So I called John, and John says, oh, whoa, wait a minute. Well, I called John and I said, hey, John, um, have you thought about bringing some women on the sailing trips? And he goes, funny you should mention that. He said, one of the executives from AT&T heard about my adventure club and he's going to bring his two daughters with him. And I said, he is? Well, what are they like? He said, well, he said, there's one, I understand she's a pretty cute 22-year-old blonde. And I went, oh, so that's going to be interesting. And then, oh, right over here, I'm sorry, the picture didn't grab it, but it's her shoulder. There was a 27-year-old single daughter. And this was the exec at AT&T. Well, as a result, on this trip, John changed his entire style of teaching. It was let the women go first, then I'll drop you off and let you go swimming in some of the areas, and I'll take the guys out and work them out for a while, and then I'll come back. And so the women had a chance to talk to each other, and as a result, my wife, not realizing it, had gotten what I call her sea legs. She had gotten into the rhythm of the boat. And now, when you put her behind the helm, she was just in love with the fact that she could take this boat and make it dance to her tune. As you can see back here, again, the small white caps. And so Diana is sailing right now a 55-foot Beneteau and sailing it to windward, which is a pretty tough feat. Okay, we're going to down. Okay, so after that sailing adventure, John says, I'm going to do another vacation sail. And I kind of exposed the slide. And so I said, where is it going to be? And he says, we are going to Greece. And I said, you're out of your mind again. I have been to, with him, I've been to the Virgin Islands several times. I have been to Tahiti, and now he wants to go to Greece. And the purple islands you see are called the Cyclades, and they are in the Ionian Sea. And some of them are, you'll notice the names of them, Mykonos, which is now a very popular tourist location. And then this is Helos. Helos, I'll go through that one in a minute. I'll show you some things about it. And then the last one is Santorini. Many people have heard of Santorini now because it is a big destination spot. When we went there were very few boats, very few people. Now they bring 3 to 4 cruise ships in per week. Life is, that's one of the things I've sort of mourned, is the loss of our history. On the island of Delos, um, it was considered part of the empire of Greece, and as such, the very wealthy built their homes on the island, and it's been excavated, and it's a place, it's very hard to get to, believe it or not. If you can get a boat over to Mykonos, you get to Mykonos, then you have to get a small boat and go to Delos. Well, we had our own sailing boat, so we went right up to the dock in Delos. Now, one of the things I haven't told you is in the picture of the crew, nothing's perfect. I sort of had it planned. One of the sailors, his name was Rudy. Rudy was a software engineer. He worked at Homedale. Now, as a young child, Rudy developed meningitis. And as a result, there may be some doctors here. One of the results is you lose your hearing, you become totally deaf, and you are legally blind. And I said to John, how are we going to handle Rudy on the boat? He said to me, don't worry about Rudy. Rudy will take care of himself, and he'll take care of you and other people. And so on the second day after we visited the Acropolis, we visited the Acropolis, which is absolutely magnificent building. We're down here in Delos, and that's the Acropolis, and that's the temple built for Athena. That is one of the architectural wonders of the world. I befriended Rudy And he said, well, how did you, how did you communicate? How did you deal with each other? In one afternoon, Rudy taught me American finger spelling. And there is a code that you can use your fingers. You put your hand in his hand, and then you spell out whatever words you want. So I partnered up with Rudy, and one or two other people did. We learned the finger spelling. And so when we went to a restaurant, we'd tell them what was on the menu. And Rudy felt over the entire boat. Now, he's legally blind, so he can see sort of shadows and things like that. And so he had a rough idea of like the shape of the boat, but that was it. And so he didn't take part in actually handling lines and sheets and doing things like that when we were sailing. So we're in Delos, and I'm standing next to Rudy, um, and I'm trying to explain to him that I'm looking at this mosaic that's 3,000 years old. And one of the things about these mosaics, which I want to point out, is these are two twin dolphins. In order to make those dolphins, they have to, the, the fabricators have to pick the stones of the right color so they can blend from seeing the dark to the light. And in doing so, they shape the stones actually to form sections of the porpoise. And you'd say, well, that's pretty obvious. So if you were blind and you had the opportunity to go in and to feel that mosaic, you could tell that those were two dolphins. So I'm standing outside the gates, and here I am with Rudy, and I'm finger spelling. And this Greek guard looks at me, and he comes over to me and he says, what are you doing? And I said to him, well, I said, I'm sorry if I'm disturbing you. I said, my friend is deaf. And so I'm explaining to him what the mural looks like. And also he's legally blind. And the guard looks at me and says, he is? And he says, let me take Rudy. I looked at him, I said, let me take Rudy. He took Rudy, opened the big gates that were locked, walked Rudy down and under this iron cable that runs all the way around the mosaic, and motioned to Rudy to kneel down and to feel the entire mosaic. And I stood there with my jaw dropping. You're going to say, okay, he's a nice guard. I was thinking back to the day I went to the Jefferson Memorial, and I was in the Jefferson Memorial, and I was reading the Gettysburg Address on the side of it. And I was saying, oh, 7 years. And I had the guard come up to me in the Jefferson Memorial, in the Lincoln Memorial, and he said, you're making noise. This is a very reverent place. And I said, I'm just reading it. He said, we don't make noise in here. This is Mr. Lincoln's temple. I went, oh. Meanwhile, here's a guard who understands the limitations of Rudy and takes him in and lets him feel a 3,000-year-old mosaic that very few people ever get to touch. And he did it without any qualms. And I said to myself, there's a lot of culture difference in the world. And I was very moved that the guard would go to that extent, but he did. Going on down, after we left Delos, this is a classic Greek island, and it's called Serifos. It's losing its population, but it's absolutely beautiful and typical. You see the windmills that they use for grinding grain during the harvest time. And then it's always very windy, so they take the vanes down. You see the buildings with the blue roofs. Now the blue, I was thinking about the color blue. Why is everything so blue? Well, one of the fellows and I climbed to the top. There's a little chapel way up here. And when you stand up there, and you look out, the Greek islands just float in a sea of absolute blue. The ocean is calm and matches basically the sky. And so the idea of the blue color being adopted by the Greeks made a lot of sense. And also, there's a very heavenly feel that it's very ephemeral. You're not on land. You don't see land around you. You're on an island in the middle of, surrounded by the ocean, um, feeling isolated but very comfortable. Uh, Surfnos was a very special island. I really enjoyed um, the climbs and the different things we did. Okay, so that was 2 years. The third year comes, and you're saying, well, again? Okay, this is the last year that I'm going to mention it. John calls me again. I don't hear from him for 11 months. He calls me and he says, Jim, you've been with me for 2 years, and you've been getting really good. He said, we're going to do the vacation sailing lessons again, but we're going to do it in reverse order. First, we're going to go on vacation, and then we'll do the bareboat chartering. He said, but we have to do it for 2 weeks. He says, so many people are hearing about my club. He said, I have to take out 2 boats, and we'll have to spend 2 weeks doing it. He said, would you take out one of the boats with me? I said, you want me to teach? He said, yes. He said, you've gotten to that point. So off we went. Oh, so off we went, bareboat charter, May 1966. We finished that up, and of course, I met a whole bunch of different people on it. And then the next thing was, I said to John, okay, this vacation sale, what do you have in mind? Oh, he said, yeah. He said, I got a great idea. He said, let's go to New Zealand. And I said, are you serious? And he goes, yeah. He said, if we go to the North Island, he said, it's subtropical and there's supposed to be a lot of really great places to sail. And I went, really? So this is a blow up of New Zealand's North Island. Here are some of the famous things that you probably are already aware of. One is the Bay of Islands. The Bay of Islands is right up here. And then I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. Then the next part of the trip would be different. It wouldn't be a daily sailing. It'll be a coastal sailing. We'd do a sail and we'd do it overnight. And then we'd come down to the Great Barrier Island, which is here, which is a big island, and it's tropical, and it's got a big lagoon on the inside, very sheltered for boats. And it's just a fantastic place to be at the Great Barrier Island. Then off to Auckland. Auckland is right over here. And then from Auckland, we'd pick up some buses, and then we would head out to a place called Rotorua, which is down around here somewhere. Rotorua is the center of the Maori civilization or culture. And that was, I'm just about done. You have to worry about timing. Yeah, okay, I'll be. So this is the Bay of Islands. If anybody has a Windows 10, it shows up when you turn on Windows 10. They use this photograph. But this is the photograph I took. The island is very, very British. And here's a picture of it. They have this beautiful lattice work on all of the hotels. And this was the Duke of Marlborough Hotel in the small town of Russell, New Zealand. Population of the upper island is 4 million people, 60 million sheep. If you want to know where your food sources come from. And with this, here's Diana doing her first really offshore coastal cruising, and she was really good at it. When we went down to Rotorua, it's very indigenous. They had their own lifestyle, and it was very unique. If you ever get a chance, see a movie called The Whale Rider, and it's a story about a young girl growing up in the Maori culture. Finished up in May 1966. Um, I'm sorry I'm running a little late in time, and that's why I did the summary first. In 1966, I had my captain's resume. I had worked with the American Sailing Association. I had my certificate to bareboat. I had done my vacation sails in all four quadrants of the universe of our Earth. And then I was also going to school at night, taking academic courses in navigation, sailing, um, and a whole bunch of other activities. And then Lucent downsized in December 1997. They called me in as a department head. And even based upon what Thad said, they said, look, your life belongs someplace else. It's time to leave Bell Labs. And so I stretched it out till September 1999. And my wife and I then had a decision to make. It was, what do I do? Go to a new corporation, go to a faculty position, change my career, or just hang around the house? I was 55 years old. And my wife and I looked at each other and we said, screw society. We're going to drop out and buy a boat. And we did. We actually we went to all the boat shows and we settled on a 58-foot center cockpit cutter that was built by Taiyang Shipbuilders in Kaohsiung. And we were going to name it Athena after our trip to Athens. Here I am in Taiwan now because I was able to find a boat dealer that would sell me a new boat and have it built in Taiwan. And we're entering a restaurant. The people, like I said, you meet a lot of people. His name was Bern Lin. Bern Lin was the naval architect. He used to send me faxes during the day. I'd get them at night. I would go over the designs and do redesign work and then send them back faxes. And that's the way the boat got designed. Here's Diana. This is Neil Weinberg, who, as of today, I still email and we talk to each other. He's going through a little bout of prostate cancer right now. And this was the general manager of the Diana Shipbuilding Company. And most people have never heard of the city of Kaohsiung. It's on the southern border of Taiwan. Okay. If you want to see how they build these boats, they lay them up with matted and sheets of fiberglass, and it's all epoxied into a hull frame. Once that's done, got the next one, Joel? Good. The next one here, this is a picture of myself, and I'm inspecting, this boat has come out of its hull, and they are now building the interior woodwork for it. And the factory is quite long. It's a big assembly line for these ships. Next slide, please. And here's Athena when she came out of the mold. And again, another trip to Taiwan. And Bern said, take the whole day, go over the boat with your wife and tell me any updates or anything you want changed, and they'll do it. And in fact, we gave them a whole laundry list, and they did it overnight. They worked overnight, and the next day the boat was ready. And we signed off on the fact that it had been completed and it was now going to be shipped to the United States by freighter. That's the way they do it. Next slide. If you want to know how long the boat is, this is me, right there, my head. This is in the sail and chain locker. The center cockpits are really great because the helm is up here high and you can see very clearly to the sides and also to the stern and forward. Next slide. Now, when I had fixed up the boat, Neil liked it so much, he was having a boat show and he wanted to sell more boats. So what I thought I'd do is I'd show you just one or two pictures of what boats look like. This is the interior salon. There's a dining table, it seats about 7 people. And then there's a second table here in which we use as a work table. You can do reading, you can do your plotting, you can do whatever you want with it. Up here is your electronic navigation equipment and all the fuses, and circuit breakers. And then there's a door behind it that goes into the engine room. Next slide. This is the galley. You have hot and cold water, two sinks, a stove, three-burner stove, and an oven, and then Formica counters, microwave, and refrigerator door, and a freezer door. And the best way to get into them without losing any of the energy is to open up the lids on the top there. Next slide. And this is my master berth. It's a queen size bed, and there's lots of storage everywhere, hanging closets, cabinets, um, side panels, and then these open up to be like little writing desks on either side. And below the bed is the entire battery bank. We have about 12 large 12-volt batteries in there that can hold like 300 amp hours, so that when you're on anchor during the evening, you can keep a lot of the electronics on the boat running, like your radar, and you can watch television if you want. You can do a bunch of things. Next slide. This was after the boat was built. I always got it already. This is actually a picture of me on Tuesday, the day before Thanksgiving, 1999, and we were going out under the Golden Gate Bridge, never to return. And next slide. We started here up in San Francisco. We came down along the Baja, all the way down to the Panama Canal, and then up Panama Canal to the Cayman Islands. And then from the Cayman Islands, we went back over to Mexico for a while, and then it was swing around Cuba, and then back to the United States, and all the way up into Charleston. This next slide, you can, we'll skip a one or two. It's cold on the Pacific. I'll leave it at that. You freeze because the Labrador Current is coming down from Alaska. And when you're out there at night, you're really bundled up. Next slide. In Mexico, this is the one slide I'll tell you anything about Mexico. I had a great time in Mexico. The standard of living is down by about a factor of 5. And yes, we did sail. If anybody thinks that we're not sailing, these are our sails. We're full out. And I thought it was a great picture. We're flying the courtesy flag of Mexico, which is a requirement for all international sailors. You have to fly a courtesy flag. Next slide. People say to me, "Do you fish when you're on your boat?" Other people say, "How do you sleep?" You take turns. Fishing, these are Dorado. They're a very interesting fish. If you go to a restaurant, you'll find it called mahi-mahi, but they were very plentiful in the Mexican waters and in the Sea of Cortez, and they put up a hell of a fight. I loved catching them. So did my wife. Next slide. This is all I'll say about Central America. I think it's summed up by this volcano. I was coming out of the night. We were sailing, and it's a gray sky. And as dawn approaches, there are no lights. In Central America, there are no lights. There's no electricity. People live daylight to night. And slowly, as I began to envision what was ahead of me, I took this picture and then I kept it, and I've thought back on it. You notice the seas were pretty calm here. That's one of the characteristics of the Pacific at the time. But I think the volcano sort of summarizes the land. There are 36 volcanoes like this in Guatemala. There are 20 in El Salvador, and there are another 20 in Nicaragua. And if you think of the volcano as a symbol of unrest, you have to deal with the political unrest and the economic unrest that goes on with the various political overthrows in these countries. And as we sailed through here, that was very, very evident. So when you hear about migrants coming up from the Central America and whatever's going on, I can tell you that they live a life that looks like Palestine today. It is just incredibly poor. Next slide. People say, hey, did you go through the Panama Canal? You really did that? Yep, here I am standing on a boat. We divided at the center, and these are two tugs, and this is a big freighter ahead of us. The tugs are to stop the backwash from the prop. And one of my friends was tied onto, that's one of the ways of going through. You can tie onto a tugboat. But I opted to go through center, and I hired four fellows to help me. Next slide. This is a picture. I'm on the other side. I am now going into the Caribbean. Since I got to this, that area first, I was ahead of the Carnival cruise ship. And so they put me in first person into the lock, and then they took this Carnival cruise ship and then they slowly maneuvered it right up to the back of me. And they told me when the water gets down and the locks open, go full throttle, because he's going to turn on his engines, which are running, and he's going to go full speed at about 25 knots. They said, just move out of his way, get out of his way. And that's exactly what happened. Next slide. Most people don't know about this, but it's becoming more popular. There is, on the north coast of Panama, there's an indigenous group of people called the Kuna natives, and they have been living there for hundreds of years, and they will come up to the boats. They'll be very friendly, and they want to trade for things like medicine. They have adequate food, but they want to look for medicine and just a few other things. And what they trade is, the next slide. They trade these. These are called molars, and you may see them in museums here in the United States. They're all hand stitched. The women make them, and they're very colorful. You frame them and you hang them in your house when you want to cheer up. And the last slide, I think, summarizes everything. We got to Charleston, South Carolina, and we found that to be a great port. And so here's a picture I took of Athena after its many travels all the way across from the Pacific over through and up to Charleston, South Carolina. We made this a home for 3 years, and we sailed out of here. We sailed up to Rhode Island, and then we sailed again to the Virgin Islands twice. And if you want to know about the Virgin Islands, the U.S. Virgin Islands is a national park, and you can stay in it for as long as you want, as long as you have a pass. And so I bought a pass for a lifetime for $10, a lifetime pass. And every day, dive over the side and go swimming and just enjoy life. At that point, we sailed back to the United States, and we decided to sell the boat, and that was an easy sale. We were both ready to go back to our home and start working on that and get involved in the local community again. And people in the local community were saying, they were writing to us like, oh my God, are you lost out there in the ocean? What's happening? You know, and I was picking up mail and email and stuff like that. So it was quite an adventure, but the slippage then from going from the blue region into the green region was a no-brainer. I had become independent. I had made all my decisions, going through the Panama Canal, everything. And so that transition was very helpful for me, at least. Person who likes to do a lot of things. So I hope you enjoyed it. I could have given you a talk about sailing and all the intricacies, but I'd lose you after a little while. I could talk to you about mathematics and microelectronics, but I'd lose a lot of people after, as Joel says, one equation. So thank you for your time, and I'll take any questions.
Oh, that was wonderful, Jim. Quite an adventure. We're running very late. No more than 2 questions.
And I'm just wondering, Oh. Yeah, traveling, you've done this for 10 years, correct?
12 years total.
12 years. When you traveled on the oceans, what about safety? And did you have a shotgun?
Okay, people ask a lot about how to handle the safety, and there are varying views. What I did is I made sure we carried no weapons at all. I had 2 Navy SEAL knives, which I kept next to our berths in case someone had gotten in at night. I could reach over and get a knife if it was necessary, but it never was necessary. Uh, every once in a while, someone would come up, like if I was at a marina, and ask me if that was my boat. Because there were a lot of unique things about Athena and that we had designed into it. And my answer to them was, nope, it's not my boat. I am a delivery captain. Now, that's a very common thing. People who buy boats and they were afraid to take it down to the Panama Canal and come back up, they'll hire a delivery captain with a crew of maybe 1 or 2 people. It's notorious stories that these hired captains actually destroy the boats. They don't check the engines, they don't check the oil. They'll just keep running them. And then when the boat gets delivered, people find out that their engines aren't running, and God help them, and they have to rebuild and do things like that. So I would always dress down. You dress like the natives. You don't wear a suit and tie, and you don't walk around like, hey, look at me, I got this great big boat. You go, no, I'm just looking for a local place I can buy some food, maybe get some fuel. And what I found is everybody was very, very helpful. I never really ran into a political problem. Don't talk politics when you're down there. Just act like you're passing through and just doing a job. And that's the way you blend in with the society, and people accept you. In Guatemala, the port captain, decided to take myself and my wife to dinner on his nickel. He said, "You're great. Come on in. I'll show you what Guatemalan food is like." So, there are hundreds of stories that I left out, but I just wanted to give you a taste. And I know it was a real squeeze to get it in. I timed it without any of the technical interruptions that came out to be 1 hour. I tried really hard. I apologize. But it was a great time. And the day we stepped off the boat, we knew it was the day to step off the boat and sell. No problem. It was not a psychological issue. Okay. Any other? That was it.
Okay.
You had
Ed, would you like to come up and thank Jim for
Jesus,
quite an adventure?
you're most welcome.
Yes, thank you for your wonderful talk. And we do have some. You're probably aware of this. We have the appreciation, the certificate of appreciation. It has an orchid. Orchids have been popular in Summit, and we carry that figure here on our certificate. And besides this, as a congratulations, we also have the stand-up. What's it called?
Thank you.
The Summit Old Guard Salute. All right, thank you very much, Jim.
Yep.